Hello, everybody. Welcome into the Apples and Genos Fantasy Hockey Podcast. My name is Nate Gruniblink. I'm the creator of Apples and Genos, originator of the Zero G Draft Strategy. And in this podcast, Blake and I are going to deep dive on 7 second-year players who popped off in the 2024-2025 season. Let's get it. And of course, I have your friend and my best friend. It's Blake Creamer. Blake, how are you feeling tonight?
I feel good, buddy. Nothing makes me feel better than hearing those words come out of that mouth, that beautiful mouth. Oh, God, it'd be derailed. That sounds weird. I feel good, buddy. I'm excited about this episode here. We were talking a little bit offline, but, when Nate and I get to dive in on guys that are a little bit under the radar, that's kind of what gets my juices flowing. That's what gets me tingly in the pants. You know what I'm saying? I've already had a beer and a half, so this is kind of the way the pod's going. But yeah, I'm excited to get into this with you, buddy. But I was going to ask you, how have you been able to catch any of these playoff games? Like, do you see any of like Edmonton actually doing stuff out there?
I haven't actually caught any of Edmonton Dallas, which is too bad because it's been the one worth
Yeah,
watching
good looking
so far
series.
in these conference finals. But yeah, it is pretty terrible to watch what the Panthers are doing to
I know,
Carolina at this stage.
violating them.
Um, yeah, I'm not one of these people who's going to be like, that should be us with the Leafs or anything like that, but it's at least a little bit validating to be like, okay, like
Yeah,
it's not just us. Like
yeah,
they were capable of doing this to anybody at any time, and they're seemingly only getting better as the playoffs wear on. So,
teams are wagging.
um, yeah, it'll be interesting to see. Like, I have to assume they finished the deal with Carolina there, but to see either team coming out of the West could definitely give them everything they could handle. I could see either of those being a handful for even a team as good as the Panthers. So, should
Yep.
be a great final once again. What should also be great to watch and or listen to is our list of 7 players who popped in their second
Unbelievable.
years.
Oh my God.
How'd you like that one? Was it?
What a
I felt like that was maybe like a B minus
it,
transition.
dude, you're a consummate professional, all right? And you're modest, all right? Ladies, he's married. I'm sorry, all right? But if I wasn't married myself, I'd kick some tires. Anyways, what were you saying, Nate?
What I was saying was Matthew Nyes was
Nice.
one of the
Okay.
players that we had to get into here. I think this is actually a really interesting player and not maybe such an obvious path forward for this player for next year from this year. I think there are some like conflicting signs with this player, and so I think it's actually a pretty interesting case study. And so that's one that I wanted to lead off with here. Season that was for Matthew Nyes: 29 goals, 29 assists, 58 points in 78 games. Rocks 18 minutes, 31 seconds average time on ice on the season. Big jump from the previous season for Matthew Nyes. And what's actually pretty interesting is that he really popped off after the new year. He did get up on that Matthews Marner line pretty early on and kind of establish himself there. But he really only popped after the new year, 35 goal, 76-point pace in the new year. So
Mhm.
really big stuff after that point. And that's kind of what you want to see, right? From your player, you want to see like some sort of linear growth, them improving as the season wears on. It's always a good sign. The underlying metrics are not like insane here with Nyes: 221st shots per 60, 133rd individual scoring chances for per 60, 179 Corsi for per 60, and 97th in scoring chances for per 60. Uh, Definitely a bit of this is the Craig Berube effect this year. You see this kind of across the board with all the Toronto players where they really kind of just played low event hockey, but really concentrating on getting really, really good looks when they did get their looks and finishing those looks when they got them. And they were actually pretty effective at doing that this year in this system. And obviously had a pretty good result. They won the division for the first time in forever. So, um, yeah, hard to say that, these metrics are exactly what they'd be on a different team either. I don't want to like dock him too much for being this far down, but also it's a data point that he might not be like a volume producer and might not have, ideally we get volume and efficiency married together and we get those elite scores. So Matthew Nyes might not be that person. 56% IPP. It was a 6.3 shots per 60, which was actually pretty much identical to the previous season, even though he had way less ice time the previous season, way better line mates this season. What did take a jump was the 8.1 individual scoring chances for per 60. That's up from 6.9 in the previous season. He also took a big jump in the shooting percentage, the on ice shooting percentage, 19.1% shooting percentage this year versus 13% the year before, 13.5% on ice shooting percentage this year versus 11.0% the year before. So that's obviously something that you have to take into consideration. Is it just that now he's playing up the lineup, he's playing with better players, he's getting better chances directed his way, and so he's being more efficient? Is that the only reason for that, or was there potentially some luck on top of that, and we should expect some potential regression there as well? That's something you have to think about here. I took a look at the with or without you chart from hockeyviz.com for Matthew Nyes. This is 5v5 effects, and what I is most jumping out to me is he did have positive effects on both Marner and Nylander when they played together. Matthews actually had a little more expected goals for without him, but also had more expected goals against. So Matthews was just whenever Nyes wasn't on his line, I guess he was playing a little more loose, a little bit
Sure.
more higher event hockey. So the net effect was actually better with Nyes on the ice, just not necessarily for fantasy. But either way, I don't think it was like a massive negative effect on Matthews to have Nyes on his line for sure. Just an interesting data point there. I don't necessarily use these as, super predictive for future success or anything like that, but it is a data point I'll look at, especially if I'm deep diving a player to try to get a more holistic picture of how I view their season. And it is a data point that it does seem like he had positive effects on both Marner and Nylander, guys who like to hang on to the puck. You can kind of see the obvious correlation in skill sets between Nyes and those wingers there. So you like to see that for sure. I think what's the most interesting thing to think about here with Nyes moving forward, this is where I want to get your input, Blake, is what's the ceiling moving forward? Talked about the efficiency here, how efficient he was this year, and that is a bit the way that the Leafs wanted to play under Berube, but how much of it was the change in style and playing style, and how much of it was just some puck luck perhaps going Nyes' way. And then what will life be like on this top line, top power play with Mitch Marner expected to leave town here in Toronto? Does that have a negative effect on the efficiency of the player? Is he going to be less on the receiving end of some of those passes from Marner? Can he continue to grow his individual chance generation? As I mentioned, the individual scoring
Right.
chances for per 60 did grow this year, even though the actual shots didn't. Or is he actually going to be a little bit more dependent on the skill guys to get him the puck? 56% IPP. He has never had really a high IPP in either of his first two seasons. Is he a little bit more of a guy who can get to the right spot but still needs someone to get him the puck once he gets there? Or is he able to kind of lean into more of a creation role for himself this next year if Marner doesn't resign and Nylander is on the other line? It's him and Matthews maybe on a top line, but who's that other winger? Does Nyes have to take on more of a puck carrying role, and is he able to do that? And is he able to increase his efficiency, at least in terms of puck touches and IPP, and maybe garnering more assists to go with the goals? So, anyway, lots to say on Matthew Nyes. I think it's really interesting. One of the players that I think has a wide range of outcomes for next season, but
Yep.
I'll kick it over to you, Blake. I've thrown a lot of ideas at you. Try to make sense of that and then add something for yourself.
You just want me to answer every single question you have, Nate. I look, you got to do your own research, Nate. All right, dang, dig
Ah,
in. All right, I'm sorry. Um, yeah, this is an interesting player for sure. Like great season, 58 points in 78 games, including the 29 goals. I didn't see that coming. I thought it was going to be kind of that like Ty Ratty on Connor McDavid's line, sort of style where you can kind of throw anybody up there and they're going to, have a modicum of success. But I think Nye's really separated himself there. He's a real player. Obviously, we see that. Big body, big hits too, 182 hits. I love that. But this is going to be a really interesting summer for the Toronto Maple Leafs. And it's going to make it difficult to predict what Nye is capable of doing. Because, all those things you mentioned, the scoring chances went up. The shots went down, but the scoring chances went up because he's getting a lot of high danger passes from guys like Mitch Marner, one of the most creative passers in the league, right? He's an amazing facilitator. So if Marner doesn't sign, it's not like, next man up scenario. Like even if you put Willie Nylander up there and he's getting plum deployment with Matthews and Nylander, like those are two shooters, right? So who's facilitating? So they're going to have to, it's all going to depend on what they do with Marner and then John Tavares as well, right? Like that's your second line. So lots of change there coming in Toronto. And I think it's going to make it very difficult to see what goes on with Matthew Knies. But I will say, and the 32 Thoughts podcast with Elliot Friedman, they talked about a Rantanen trade with the Maple Leafs. Did you hear about this, Nate? Where Knies was on the table and the Leafs declined it for Rantanen. And it wasn't 1-for-1. I'm sure there's lots of other pieces in there, but I mean, that says that speaks volumes as to what, Coach Craig Berube, the GM, think about Matthew Knies and his potential future here in Toronto, and also probably the opportunity that he's going to receive as well. So one thing I really like about Matthew Knies as well, he's an amazing forechecker, right? This guy bangs, he goes in, he's amazing at puck battles. He gets the puck out and he gets it to guys like Auston Matthews. And, by all intents and purposes, he should be with Auston Matthews next year. So, he's going to get, a lot of those rebound chances with Auston Matthews, saying that he's 100% healthy going into the year. That's going to be nice. So we'll get some rebound stuff. He'll still get those big chances, but to me, it really depends on what happens with Mitch Marner and how they're going to deploy these guys. So, I think at this point in Nye's career, I see him more as a supplementary piece. We've talked about this before, kind of like a Gabe Vilardi guy. He's out there to win puck battles, get the puck to the superstars on the team, and then just find the gaps in the defense and fire away. And he did that really well this last season. So it remains to be seen whether he can kind of add elements to his game of more play creation and offense driving, right? And we'll see. He's a young guy, and he's got the coach's confidence.
All right. We'll bring it over to you, Blake. Who's the player that you brought to the equation here?
You bet your sweet bippy, buddy. We got to talk about Luke Hughes of the New Jersey Devils. This guy's a unit. I love it. Before the pod here, I was just watching some Luke Hughes highlights. God damn. I mean, this guy's a train. I was saying to Nate, like, he's basically Quinn Hughes, but he's bigger and faster. He does that. So I love this player, and I'm going to get into it here. But really nice season for Luke Hughes. 7 goals, 37 assists, 44 points in 71 games. I love that. Average time on ice, 2109, which is, a little bit down from last year, but nothing major. It's not concerning, right? Let's dig in on his metrics here. On the year, 60th overall in shots on goal per 60 amongst defensemen, 38th overall in chuck and pucks per 60, and then 11th overall in individual scoring chances for per 60. So that's the number I really like to see. A defenseman that generates his own individual scoring chances. To me, that's more of a defenseman like Zach Werenski as opposed to like Elaine Hudson. You know what I mean? Like there's a difference there. They're both great defensemen, great offensive defensemen, but they generate offense in different ways. And I would much rather go for a guy like Luke Hughes that is able to generate, his own shots and certainly his own scoring chances. He's really good at that. So I like that. 11th overall amongst D-men and individual scoring chances for 60. Really nice stuff. One thing as well that I loved about Luke Hughes here this season, he had a much better season at 5-on-5. Like he, 44 points this year after 47 last year. Granted, he had a higher pace. He had a 51-point pace as opposed to the 47 he had last year, but he was so much better at 5-on-5. And that's really nice to see. His IPP, his shots on goal per 60, and his individual scoring chances for per 60 all improved over last season. And the IPP in particular, way improved. Like, what the hell? This guy is 58% IPP at 5-on-5, up from 31% last season. And just so you know, like that's tops in the league, like, or that's top 2 in the league. I looked at it here, like that's crazy. So, there's a good chance that falls. But what that does say is this guy is in on 58% of the goals at 5-on-5, right? And that's because he's a really good puck rushing defenseman, and he's really slick with his passing. So I think that Luke Hughes has the potential to be an elite offensive D man, just the way that he drives play and his overall contribution to the offense. So that said, too, numbers with the man advantage, right? That's kind of where he fell off a bit. 25 power play points last year, and then 16 power play points this previous year. So, the good news is his numbers, his metrics were much better on the power play. Shots on goal per 60, individual scoring chances, all that stuff. The problem is his power play time on ice was way down. Last year or in 23-24, he averaged 3.5 minutes power play time on ice. This last season, he got the power play 2 treatment, where Dougie Hamilton was eating on the top unit. So he got just 1 minute and 38 seconds average power play time on ice. So that was the problem, but not what was going on under the hood with Luke Hughes. So that's, again, just a nice data point that we like to see, because now what happens if he does get power play 1? Like, it, to me, I think it's going to be blast off time with Luke Hughes. Like, I think in the right situation, Hughes can be an absolute smash for fantasy. Dougie Hamilton still has 3 more years on his contract there, but Sheldon Keefe, the head coach there in New Jersey, he hasn't been shy about putting Hughes on the top power play. And I could see him displacing Hamilton as soon as next year. Like, we saw it 2 years ago. That wouldn't surprise me. Like, if they decided to go with Luke Hughes as kind of the 1A power play, and then get big shooter Dougie Hamilton on the 1B power play. So yeah, I think even though Luke Hughes got a lot less points this year, the increase in even strength points is really encouraging to me. And I think there isn't much of that seems unsustainable to me, besides the IPP. I think the IPP was redlining. He did it for a full season, so we can't discount it. But I think that it makes sense that that's going to come down a bit. But if he does get a higher power play share than 42% that he got this year, I think that we could see another career high, or a career high, for Luke Hughes here. And I think I'm going to be in on him big time. And that brings me to a question here. First off, I want to hear your thoughts on Luke Hughes. But what do you think about Dougie Hamilton versus Luke Hughes next year? Is that even a conversation with Hamilton still under contract for the next 3 years?
I think it is a conversation, and it's an important one for fantasy for sure. Um, I don't know that I have a strong take, but I know that it's a really valuable role, right? Like, you're talking about a New Jersey power play that was 3rd in the league last year. So
Yes.
whoever is on it is going to get power play points, unless they play just horribly, and then they'll be off it. So,
Right.
um, and honestly, both of these players, I think, are at least borderline elite offensive defensemen already in the league. And so I think either one could fulfill the role quite adequately, but they are different players for sure in terms of how they attack. And obviously, Dougie Hamilton shoots a lot, and Luke Hughes is a bit more selective in that regard. In regards to the IPP, like, the on ice shooting percentage was down this year for Luke Hughes. Wasn't really his fault, as far as I can see from all the metrics that we like to look at. Really just looks like the Devils didn't convert as well when he was on the ice. And so I do think that should positively regress next year. And even if the IPP comes down, I'm not really worried about his 5v5 production dropping off because of that. But yeah, the power play is still going to be the number one thing here. I I think that Keefe has a bit of inertia in these kinds of things where he doesn't like to make changes a lot of times. Um, and so, if I had to tell you who's going to be starting on power play 1 on game 1 come next year, I would say it's Dougie Hamilton. If I had to, I am, like, I don't know, 60% confident in that take at this point,
What a take.
because, like, I think you have to look at what Luke Hughes did this season, and you have to see a player who absolutely can be an elite level player in the entire league. And how long can you keep that kind of player just kind of toiling away on power play 2, especially when he's the brother of your franchise player in Jack Hughes? Realistically, I think Luke Hughes has the potential to be a franchise caliber player if everything goes well with his development over the next 2-3 years. So yeah, he may very well just make himself that level of player where you can't ignore it anymore and you actually have to move him in there. And to some extent, I think he might even be slightly better fit on the top power play. You have Jack Hughes who shoots a lot. You have shooting options in Heischer, who kind of has sometimes a similar to that Sam Reinhart role on the New Jersey power play, playing in the bumper a fair bit. You have Bratt as a distributor on the other side. Um, yeah, I think that there's at least a scenario in which Luke Hughes actually outperforms Dougie Hamilton in terms of power play efficiency for the New Jersey Devils, and he is actually the better choice for them moving forward. So I think there are paths for sure for Luke Hughes to get there. I'm just not convinced that Sheldon Keefe is the guy who will like change his mind immediately based on the best thing for the team at the time. Um, just because I've seen him have some inertia and these kinds of things in the past. So that's what I'm trying to kind of work through for myself mentally, because I do think it is a pretty big swing. I'm very interested to see where Luke Hughes gets drafted next year. Like, if people are very sold on Dougie Hamilton reprising his role as the top power play defenseman next year, I think there's a fair amount of risk in that regard this year. And while I might have a pretty solid projection on Dougie Hamilton based on, especially if we get any camp reports that Dougie Hamilton is practicing with the top power play unit, I think I might actually be pretty interested in Luke Hughes as one of these later round defensemen, and maybe he goes in round 10 or something, and he's fine for you as like a fourth defenseman or something throughout the season. But if he ever gets on that top power
Yeah,
play and
the upside.
or even gets like, if they decide to go from 21 minutes to 24 minutes with Luke Hughes and have him take that next step as the franchise defenseman, then yeah, he could immediately just return huge dividends from that spot. I do think that the talent is all there. I really like the underlying signs we saw from him this year. I think it's all lining up for him to have a linear ascent as one of the league's best defensemen throughout the course of his career. All right, next up is my next player, and it's Connor Bedard. Now, I know you're thinking, what, Connor Bedard? He didn't pop off this year. Well, I guess to some extent,
Second year player.
if it's a relative consideration versus what he did last year, maybe you have an argument there. But he still led all second-year players in points scored: 23 goals, 44 assists, 67 points in 82 games played. Yes, it was a step back from year one, but you can argue that the scenario was even worse for him this year um, in a fair number of ways, I guess. Let's deal with the ugly stuff first, I guess. 170th shots per 60, 222nd individual scoring chances for per 60, 272nd in Corsi for per 60, and 238th in on scoring chances for per 60. The shots per 60 go down from 9.2 in his rookie year to 7.0 this year. Individual scoring chances for per 60 go down from 10.1 in his rookie year to 7.2 this year. Almost all of that comes at 5v5, where, yeah, he was really shut down this year.
Mhm.
I think you've talked about it a fair bit this year, Blake. It really feels like teams have kind of gotten a book on Connor Bedard, and it feels like he hasn't quite developed that counterpunch yet. And maybe he doesn't have one, but I tend to, I tend to believe in these number one overall picks who've absolutely destroyed all competition they faced at every level on their way to the NHL and have had a lot of success early in their careers, even if it's not, the linear ascent into superstardom that many expected for Bedard. I will also say, like, the IPP goes down from 78% his rookie year to 66%. I think a fair amount of that is just bad luck. The shooting percentage went up a little bit, 10.7% to 11.8%. On ice shooting percentage went up 11.2% to 13.0%. A good chunk of that is on the power play. Chicago actually had a pretty decent power play this year by the end of the season, all things told. So, looking kind of across the board, it is a little bit concerning to me. The with or without you doesn't look terrific. Mostly when he's on the ice, they just get worse at expected goals against, and they don't really get a whole lot better in terms of the expected goals for. Um, Him versus these other players that he has played a significant number of minutes with. Yeah, there's not a lot of positive effects there over the course of the season. Like, he never really had I would say he never really had like a truly terrible stretch. Definitely the goal scoring fell off in some spots. Like he only had one goal in November in 12 games, for example. He only had 4 points in 8 games in February, but he closes out the year in the last 8 games in April. He has 9 points there. And at the end of the day, this is a player who is still, as of this podcast, 19 years old. He has 2 full NHL seasons under his belt before he turns 20. If there's anybody fading a number one overall pick with this kind of pedigree, I'm just going to be buying on that. I'm very curious to see where the ADP lands for Bedard next year. Maybe they'll make a really, really big splash this year. They'll go sign, maybe they'll sign Marner or somebody like that. Huge splash, and everybody all of a sudden is all the way bought back in on Connor Bedard. That's possible. But I do expect that, we saw him in like the third round in some drafts last year, definitely the fourth round. If he didn't go in the third. And I'm curious to see if that slips this year, if people are, kind of taking a wait and see approach a bit more with Bedard. If he slips into the fifth, sixth round this year, I think that's going to be a spot where I'm probably going to feel a little bit more comfortable taking a big swing on upside here, because I still think that there's a pretty good chance that it all clicks for Bedard in year 3 and he goes off for like 40 goals and a point per game. And we have that kind of huge season from him. What's your take here, Blake?
Yeah, I can't really disagree with any of that. I think this is a point per game player probably next year, right? I mean, all dependent on what Chicago does in the offseason. I've talked about it, in a couple pods here, so I'm not going to go too much. But yeah, he was bouncing around different lines all season, and he just didn't have the horses, right? He had to be the guy making the passes, making the plays. If he wasn't doing it, it wasn't really happening, right? I mean, they had Ryan Donato, who, had a nice little season, but, arguably, like, Bedard was probably the catalyst for that. You know what I mean? Even if it's just guys are keying in on Bedard and now Ryan Donato is left, more open to get better scoring chances and shots, right? So I also think that Connor Bedard, he wants it so bad. You can see that, right? I mean, just the mentals, like, this guy puts a lot of pressure on himself. He's been not just like, the best player on his team, like the best player in his age, right? Like in the world. So to go and to not be able to succeed the way that you have previously, that's got to be hard, especially for a young guy. He's 19. He's used to winning, right? He's used to winning everything. And now he's on one of the worst teams in the entire league, and he's not performing up to his own standards. So I think that, there's some work to do mentally as well for Bedard that I'm sure he will do, because this is a guy that's absolutely dialed in. And I think that, people are going to be sleeping on him next year. It's weird to me that people are already kind of like checking out on Bedard. This guy is elite. I mean, one of the things I look at all the time, who's entering the zone with the puck, and what happens when you enter the zone with the puck. Are you getting scoring chances because of that? Well, yeah, when Bedard does it, you sure as hell are, because he's amazing at that, right? And facilitating offense for his team. And that didn't, it went down. His entries that led to chances per 60, according to all three zones, went down last year, but it's still elite, right? And that's in a down year. And I think it's just growing pains for Bedard. They do need to supplement him with some other players. So I'm excited. Like you said, ADP for Bedard next season is going to be really key. I think this could be a big time value for us.
All right. Kicking it back to you, Blake. Who's player number 4?
Kick it. Oh, that's Nate's new thing. He says kick it all the time. And I'm here for it as well. Also, with or without you, why haven't you broken into like a YouTube with or without you?
That's a good one.
It's my Bono. Boner. That's the way my brain associates.
Wow.
I just want to say the word boner. All right. Does anyone
Thanks
see
for
Growing Pains? Yeah, you remember Growing Pains, Nate? You watched this a lot as a kid, right? Mike Seaver's best friend's name was Boner. Anyways, let's move on. Shout out my people in the chat. All right, in the comments, if you know who Boner Stabone is. All right, let's move on. My guy is Matt Coronado. All right, of the Calgary Flames, we got to talk about this guy. Really nice season for Coronado. Parlayed that into a beautiful contract with the Calgary Flames. So I'd love to see that as well. But let's dig in on what he was able to do. 24 goals, 23 assists for 47 points in 77 games. Really nice stuff for Coronado. averaged 17 minutes, 35 seconds, average time on ice on Calgary. So again, for a 22-year-old player, that's really nice to see, really encouraging. And he had 15 points in the last 21 games as well. So really good stuff for Coronado, especially at the end there. On the year, metrics-wise, he was 101st in shots on goal per 60, 68th overall in individual Corsi for per 60, and then 98th overall in individual scoring chances for per 60. So middle of the road, a little bit better than middle of the road stuff for Matt Coronado. Nothing to sneeze at, all right? He spent most of last season with Blake Coleman and Mikael Backlund. That was his line, and he was really dynamite in that role. Landed himself the contract, as we talked about, and rightfully so. One of the things that we saw as the season went on with Matt Coronado, he just got more and more responsibility and power play time on ice as well. And he was able to do something with that. This guy popped for 17 power play points. We love to see it. 52% power play share. I think that's going to go up next year. I love that. So also, and I look at his line with Blake Coleman and Backlund, like that to me seems like the third line, but they were getting the most time on ice at 5-on-5 on most nights, which says a lot about the coach's confidence with a player as young as Matt Coronado, putting him out there in those big minutes 5-on-5. So something that I think is really interesting about Matt Coronado, and I talked about this with Corey Schneider when I had him on the show, all three zones. First off, Calgary's team metrics. One thing I noticed is that they, as a team, were really reliant on counterattacks and offense from turnovers in the neutral zone. And Coronado, in particular, was excellent at that. Like, according to all three zones, he led the league in offense originating from the neutral zone per 60. Matt Coronado did. Like that's a fun tidbit right there. And also, he led the league in shots off neutral zone turnovers. So obviously, for those that don't know, neutral zone turnovers and rush offense from the neutral zone, that can be, difficult for the teams to deal with, right? Because the goalie can't get set per se, and offensive players like Coronado can be creative in real time. So either way, I don't really know what it means, to be honest with you, but Coronado led the league in something. And, that's a new stat that Corey Schneider's tracking, is kind of where offense originates from. And Coronado led the league in that offense from the neutral zone. So that's just an interesting piece to me. So moving on to like his contract, I think like he signed a $6.5 million contract AAV till I think it's 2032. So pretty damn nice there. That says to me that the team is really confident in his abilities and they're going to continue to deploy him in an increased role, right? And then I think that equals power play one, and it should. So, what do we do with this guy next season? I think that Coronado he's probably a 70-point guy, maybe not next season, but sometime in his career, I think he'll probably crest 70 points. I think, Calgary, as they're constructed currently, like they're feeble. Right, they're feeble offensively. It's not good. Expected goals for them, 28th in the league. Actual goals scored, 29th in the league at 5-on-5. Like, that's not a hot offensive environment. All right, that's like me and Nate out on the ice playing shinny. All right, that's the level. And then Calgary's power play was, it was 23rd best in the league, so that stinks as well. I think it's going to be interesting to see what Calgary does this offseason. If they kind of can keep that sort of workman-like hard work mentality that they have and maybe add some skill pieces to supplement, I think there's a good chance that Coronado could hit 60 points next season. And I think at the very least, he has the bones of a player that can be really valuable for fantasy. Where are you at with Matt Coronado? Do you think that, he can improve on his 47 points, or is this something, certainly with his line deployment that he's on, is this kind of a ceiling for him if he stays with Backlund and Coleman?
Well, I would kind of think that, but like I think it was also pretty clearly his best fit in terms of line mates. Like they did try him with Huberto, they did try him with Kadri, and it didn't really work. And like if you look at the with or without you for Coronado on Hockey
Sing it,
News,
Nate. What are you doing?
uh, like it didn't work with Kadri and Huberto, and that's backed up there. And it really did work with Backlund and Coleman, and both Backlund and Coleman had way better results with Coronado than without him. So Yeah, I think it's pretty interesting to try to evaluate what would be best for Coronado because you might think like a guy that you want shooting the puck, like put him with Huberto, put him
Yeah,
with Kadri, like
yeah,
the other two offensive guys on the team, and that should be the best thing. But it might not actually be the case for Coronado. Um, yeah, from that perspective, it's a little bit tough to figure out if he can um, elevate into another level where he is getting like 19 plus minutes a night or
yeah,
something like that. That's what I'd love to see, obviously, from a guy like Coronado. I will note, like, he did very, very well. Like, he led the team in scoring chance for percentage, a lot of these metrics. Like, he is actually showing out really well. And I think he actually, from the look of it, it's because of some pretty good defense to go along with some pretty good
mm,
offense. You'd
love
think
that.
that maybe it's the Backlund and Coleman effect, but if you just go by the with or without you, he actually had more of an effect on them than they had on him. So, altogether, I think you're getting the idea of a well rounded player, and that's probably why Calgary felt so comfortable to sign him to the contract that they did. Big long term contract there. But it is hard to envision this Calgary situation becoming, such an elite situation for Coronado that it elevates him on top of what he's potentially able to add to his own game. And so that's the tough part about projecting him to take like some huge step next year. Do I think that he potentially has another level next year? Yeah, I do. Like 58% IPP, I could see him adding, another 7 to 10% there. Wouldn't be too hard to envision as a third year player. Like he's barely over 100 games in the NHL, played 34 games the year before, 77 this year. So it's not that unfathomable to think that he has another gear to go here. Um, the real sticking point is this Calgary offense going to be a drag on his production moving forward? And the answer to that is probably.
Probably, yeah.
But to what extent, and to what extent he can excel beyond it is really the question here. We'll see where it lands in the projections. I didn't actually. One thing I was gonna do is just try to get an idea of how they if they was getting more minutes towards the end of the season here.
I think he
Um,
was, or it certainly ramped up. Like according to Frozen Tools, like in the last quarter, he had 1857 average time on ice.
right.
Third quarter, he had 1743, and then the first quarter it was 1539. So it was a steady progression of
Yeah.
ice time that he had.
Yeah, 1852 over the last 20 games according to Natural Stat Trick, which is really nice to see. And so that can also be a way that you get more production out of a player too, right? And so that'll definitely be factored in our projections when we do our projections. But yeah, just based on that alone, I think we'll probably be looking at a base projection at least in the 55-point range, if not the 60-point range, with some potential if he does take another step individually, that he could be pushing that
Yeah.
65, 70-point range where he ends up just being a total fixture in your lineup all year long.
What, Nate? Before we move on, just real quick, what do you think about the neutral zone stuff? Is that something that you put any stock into, or like what does that mean to you?
I don't know if it necessarily moves the needle for me. I think it might just be describing how a player gets his offense rather than, um, you know, predicting some future increase in offense. Definitely, it's not a bad thing to have that maybe a bit more unique skill set where, maybe by virtue of strong defensive play on that line, they're turning over pucks more often in the neutral zone. And by virtue of his offensive abilities, turning those immediately into goals for his team. Um, so yeah, it's definitely not a bad thing to lead the league
Yeah,
in
it's
something like
interesting.
that.
Yeah,
But unless he is able to grow in the other areas of the game, then probably end up in the same place projection wise or anything like that, right? So it's never a bad sign to see something like that, but it might be a little bit more descriptive than predictive for me. All right, player number 5. My player here is going to be Pavel Dorofeyev. 35 goals, 17 assists, 52 points in 82 games played. He did have some pretty significant ups and downs through the season. I went back and looked at his splits month by month. He scores 6 goals in October, scores 6 goals in November, then scores only 1 goal in December, comes back in January, scores 9 goals in 15 games in January, then only scores 2 in February, 7 in March, and then 4 in April. So he had a little bit of an up and down season. Definitely a portion of that was, earlier in the season he didn't have that power play run one role lockdown, and so you can definitely do some correlation there. You can see it in the ice time bouncing around too
Yeah.
when he was on power play one and when he wasn't. So definitely that plays into it. In the playoffs here, he only played in 8 games. He was, from all accounts, playing hurt in the playoffs. He averages still 17.26 average time on ice in the playoffs, only 1 goal and 1 assist in those 8 games, though. Um, on the season, the individual rate stats here are just obscene. Fifth in shots per 60, 12th in individual scoring chances for per
Yeah.
60, 72nd Corsi for per 60, and 63rd in on ice scoring chances for per 60. The shots per 60 were up from the previous year, was at 9.3, goes to 11.3 this year. Individual scoring chances for per 60 was at 10.4, goes up to 11.0. The IPP actually goes down from 73% to 57%. I think that's probably due to just playing with more players, better players, where he didn't actually have to score the goals.
Yeah.
Oftentimes you'll see good players down the lineup have really high IPPs, and then they get higher up the lineup, and they don't have to be like it. They aren't the sole reason the fourth line scores a goal if the fourth line scores a goal. So the IPP does come down a little bit. Shooting percentage basically held 13.4% the season before, 13.8% this year. On ice shooting percentage up 10.0% to 11.0%. That's actually not that big of a jump considering the power play one time he got this year. I'm actually pretty happy about these efficiency numbers because it feels like there's still meat on the bone here to some extent with Dorofiev. The IPP in particular, I think, could creep up over 60% next year pretty comfortably, especially having seen him get a 73%, albeit further down the lineup the year before. And the 11.0% on ice shooting percentage, I should say, I think that has some room there too with the efficiency of the player and the power play and all the rest going on there. So altogether, I think there's a lot of good stuff in that regard. On the season as a whole, he had a 16.32 average time on ice. As I mentioned, he was about 17 and a half minutes in the playoffs, 17 minutes, 38 seconds average time on ice in the month of April at the end of the season. So definitely trending in the right direction there. And you also see he's not just a power play merchant. He has positive 5v5 effects on basically everyone in the with or without you chart here, including Jack Eichel, which is maybe the one player that you'd expect to do just fine away from Dorofiev. But actually, Eichel had a pretty huge positive effect in the minutes that he did get with Dorofiev. It wasn't the most common line by any stretch, but when it did happen, it was a really good effect there as well. So, really, really good stuff from that chart that I like to see, where he's basically having a positive effect on everybody that he plays with in terms of expected goals for. I think when we look at the season that he had, especially down the stretch when he kind of solidified a role, the chemistry with Thomas Hurdle and on the top power play was really evident. I think really the next step that we're looking for here is, can he add some playmaking to the elite individual rates that he's been putting up here? Obviously, this is a guy who likes to shoot the puck and he does well at shooting it. He has an absolute bomb on that power play, and it was a crucial part of the Vegas power play and should continue to be moving forward. But what I really want to see is, can he add some playmaking, or is he really just going to be one of these like Chris Kreider types who, he may score 40 plus goals next year. That may actually be like my base projection based on this season and a little bit more ice time. That's very possible. But can he get more than like 20 assists to go with those 40 goals? That definitely adds up over the course of a season. If he is not really doing much more than score goals, it's great. But to take a step into, kind of the elite producer category, he definitely needs to add some more playmaking. And that's the part that I think the jury is still out on for me. What do you say, Blake?
Yeah, I like all of that. I mean, obviously, this is a player we're still going to be into, even if he is a Chris Kreider type next year, right? This is a guy that just popped for 33 goals, and like you said, there's some meat on the bone there. This guy could, yeah, he's got a little bit in the tank there. I mean, certainly in points wise, but yeah, I mean, 40 goals next year, he could do that. But yeah, it's right now the way he's profiling. as a young guy. He's only 24, but he's profiling as a sniper, right? Just a pure sniper. Obviously, like he's got that amazing one timer, a la Elias Pettersson from maybe 3 years ago. That's Pavel Dorofeyev.
Now
Great
you're
one
just
timer out
hexing
there.
him.
Oh God, well, you know what? Whatever. Maybe he took what Pettersson had and he's got to give it back. All right, that's what we need. But yeah, this is a guy that is clearly, he's got a clapper, he's got a bomb, and he should be on power play one. I think even more than he was this last season. He had a 59.7% power play share. There's potential that goes up. He got
Yep.
13 power play goals, 17 power play points. I could see him getting over 20 power play points next year pretty easily, right? So, yeah, I like the player a lot. I think he's obviously draftable with this kind of profile. But yeah, can he he's really good with hurdle, as you mentioned. Again, Corey Schneider's micro stats here. He was not in the 97th percentile in getting shots off of high danger passes. So, and hurdle was the one feeding him those passes. So it's great, but he's got to add more to his game to be a more well-rounded fantasy asset. And I haven't seen it yet. It doesn't mean it's not going to happen. This is a young guy, but we'll see what happens with Dorofeyev. But I sure like the player. I'm wondering, does he remind you at all of Kirill Marchenko? Like, I know they had kind of the same statistical profile in terms of what they were able to do. Like, Marchenko a couple years ago with the Cy Young sort of season that he had, and Dorofeyev did that this year. Do you see any parallels between him and Kirill Marchenko?
I think there are some for sure, but like stylistically, I don't necessarily see that, right? Like Marchenko, we know is like this elite caliber rush player, and I feel like those kind of elite caliber rush players maybe have that ability to add playmaking more consistently, perhaps. We saw that with Marchenko this year, obviously. And so Dorofeyev being maybe a little bit more of a find a spot and shoot kind of guy, like get yourself open and get that elite shot off kind of player. Maybe there's a little bit different kind of analysis there stylistically, and maybe it's a little bit more difficult for a player of Dorofeev's style to begin to generate more playmaking off of that when he really just does want to be that F3 and hang high in the zone and
Yeah.
come downhill and find that one timer. So I don't know. What do you think about that? Is there anything
Yeah.
you doing the research on all three zones as we speak or what?
Yeah, a little bit. Just because I think there is a little bit of a comparison. When I dig in on Dorofeyev a little bit, he's good off the rush, right? At least generating shots off the rush, and that could
Right.
be hurdle coming in, setting up a chance for Dorofeyev, right? Exactly what you described. But yeah, he's more of a rush offensive player than an in zone offense player,
Hmm.
according to all three zones. And obviously we know what he's doing on the power play. So I think there is a little bit there, right? Like I'm even just looking at the seasons that Marchenko had, let's say in 23-24, he had 23 goals, 19 assists, and then he was able to go from 19 assists to 43 assists. Oh my God. And a lot of that with Marchenko was the line that was created, right?
Hmm.
Monahan and Voronkov, right? That's a perfect line. They had a great season. So I don't know. What did they do with Dorofeyev? So he sticks with Hurdle. Can we get a right winger on that line that maybe complements that line even more and unlocks those two players a little bit? Maybe. I think there's something there. I wouldn't consider Pavel Dorofeyev just a kind of set up and shoot guy. I think he has some chops for rush play, but yeah, he's going to need some help there, and obviously he has to probably stick with Hurdle, and he has to get power play one for any of this to matter.
All right. Let's continue on. But before we do, I did want to take a second and send a call out to the people who did this last week as well. And we've had some good responses and some people to talk to as a result. And I'm excited about that. But we are still looking for some people to help out with Apples and Junos in a few different areas. There's a few ideas that we have about ways that we can improve the product here, but Blake and I personally can't necessarily accomplish all of that and still continue to be on the mic as much as we are and doing all the things that we do. So we are looking for some help. Maybe some patron members would like to get a free patron subscription, something like that. We can work it out, but There's stuff in, video, audio editing that we've got ideas around. Join in the podcast. We'd like to, add a podcast or two to the rotation in the off season and in season as well. So if you think you got some of those chops, you can hit us up. And then also helping out with us posting on socials. It's not exciting stuff, but it
Don't
is
undersell it,
actually.
Nate. It's very exciting.
It's not exciting. I
Oh
won't.
no.
I won't oversell it, but yeah, it is relatively a low time investment, and yeah, you can definitely get yourself a free Patreon subscription if you want to take that on for us in some capacity this upcoming year. So, if you're interested, you know where to find us. DMs are open. Best place is probably on Discord, but come talk to us, one or the other of us, and we'll start to figure some of that out. Without further ado, Blake, I'll kick it over to you for your third player. Player number 6 is.
You bet, big dog. It's Marco Rossi. All right. Marco Polo.
You
That's a
didn't even
great
give me a
game.
chance, man.
Damn. You know what? We'll edit it out. Hey, well, let's do it again. Marco.
Polo. Oh, that was
Lame.
great.
All right. It was horrible. All right. But you know what? We have the tools to edit and we won't. All right. Because this is an uncut, raw podcast. All right. You're getting raw, Nate. You're getting raw, Blake. That's how we get to biz. All right.
All right.
I don't know what I'm doing. Let's talk about Marco Rossi. All right. It's what we're here for. All right. Oh my God, I have notes in there, not in front of me. Okay. 24 goals, 36 assists for 60 points. Marco Polo Rossi, amazing stuff. Averaged 18 minutes, 15 seconds, average time on ice. That's excellent stuff. But I mean, unfortunately, he did fade down the stretch a little bit with only 9 points in the last 20 games. That stinks, Marco. What are you doing? Also, to add to that pain, his ice time fell off a cliff in the playoffs. He only averaged 11 minutes in 6 games and was playing with the absolute unit, Yakov Trenin and Justin Brazeau. Okay, that's showing no good. That's what we call bum deployment. Okay, instead of plum.
Got it. Yeah.
Right. Oh, okay. And that honestly, that just the fact that they did that in the offseason there with Marco Rossi, there's a bit of speculation that he might not be in the Wild's future plans, right? And could be made available for a trade. So that's something to consider moving into next year. But overall, 60 points for Marco Rossi as the 2C on Minnesota. That's a great season. That's a really great season. And you called it, man. You had Marco Rossi as a sleeper, a guy you were interested in going into the season. And 60 points for this guy, I think you hit it. You absolutely hit it. Like that's a really nice sleeper season, a guy that provided big time value that you probably got off waivers at some point during the season, right? So that said too, metrics stink. All right. Why does Nate like Marco Rossi and he doesn't like Casey Middlestat? Can anybody explain that to me? I don't know. But Marco Rossi, yeah, he's not a metrics guy. Let's just be real about that. On the season, 325th overall in shots to goal per 60. 202nd overall in individual scoring chances for per 60. So, he improved by, over 100 there. So that's good, Marco. We appreciate that. But honestly, when I'm digging in here on Marco Rossi, I think a lot of his success came from the opportunity that he was given with this team, right? Top 6 minutes, he was playing with either Boldy and Zuccarello, the Zucchini Man, or Cap, right? He was playing with Kirill Kaprizov, 2 elite offensive generators. And, you got Rossi in the sidecar here, right? He's in the sidecar with the helmet. All right. Kirill Kaprizov's in the main motorcycle, no helmet, flow in the wind. You know what I'm talking about, Nate? You ever done that?
I've never done it, but the visual you're painting is just spectacular.
Nate, if we rode a bike with a sidecar, who would ride the main bike and who would be in the sidecar? Be honest.
I don't think we need to have this pissing match on
Oh
there.
God! Oh, sorry. All right, we'll do it offline. Okay, fine. I don't mind riding the sidecar, Nate. I'll just be honest with you there. I kind of like the hat. I like the propeller. It's just derailing.
Dear.
Sorry, buddy. All right, but yeah, with back to Rossi here. Time on ice went up at 5-on-5, which is excellent. But all the metrics that matter that we like here at Apples and Ginos, they fell away. So shots on goal per 60 down from 6.51 2 years ago to 4.42 this year. Individual scoring chances 4 per 60 down from 6.23 to down to 6.23 this year from 6.7. Oh my God. How many numbers am I going to say here? All right. The individual scoring chances for per 60 went down to 6.23 from 7.62 last year, and his IPP fell off as well. It was 75% 2 years ago, which is indicative of a pretty damn good offensive player, to just 62.5% this last season. So things are trending in the wrong direction. We don't like to see that. Digging in on some micro stats there with Corey Schneider, all three zones. This guy is in the 96th percentile in shots off of high danger passes, which is something I like to look at. And that just screams to me Kaprizov and Matt Zuccarello, right? These are guys that, like, he played a lot with Zuccarello, and Cap and Boldy were sort of interchangeable there, but Zuccarello is a great facilitator, and Rossi played a lot of minutes with him. So it's also been well documented with Rossi that he dealt with long COVID symptoms, and that sort of derailed his career just a touch, or his development. And I'm still not sure where I'm at with Rossi, to be honest with you. Like, I think the offensive talent is there. We know that this guy's good offensively, but is he able to do it on his own? Or is he more of a supplementary piece like so many others that we talk about here? Like, he's an RFA going into this year. Is he the 2C in Minnesota? I don't think so, right? Like, why did they drop him down to the fourth line in the playoffs? That doesn't make any sense to me. He also got, power play one for a reasonable amount this year, 55.7 power play percentage share, 16 power play points, pretty damn nice. Is that going to get better, or is it going to get worse? Like, his deployment in the playoffs suggests to me that it might get worse, right? And Minnesota's finally out of cap hell. They were paying for, some buyouts that they had. So they're going to be big players here in the offseason. They're going to be looking to pick up some people and maximize, Cap's prime, Matt Boldy's prime. They want to get people in here that can help this team win, because they've got a lot of good pieces. And I'm not sure that Marco Rossi is going to be one of them. So I don't know. I wouldn't be surprised if the team looks to do like a bridge deal or something with Marco Rossi, kind of like a show me contract, a couple of years, to see what this guy can really do, or maybe like a sign and trade. I've heard, and this kind of gets me juiced. I like the Canucks are kicking tires on Marco Rossi. That I would love Marco Rossi as a 2C. I really would, but I'm an optimist, right? I don't know. Like, all the stuff I just said still holds water, but like, you always hope for the best. You're like, yeah, this is a guy that's, maybe he's played in the shadow of a couple of players. Well, what happens when he gets bumped up the lineup and he's like one of the main guys? Maybe he can elevate his game. And we've seen a little bit of that here and there. So I don't know. I don't feel super comfortable drafting Rossi next season, to be honest, until we see like a vote of confidence, either from the coach or management, whether it be Jay Hines talking about Rossi and the plans, or maybe just the team signing him to like a longer contract. So after this season, Nate, you saw what Rossi was able to do. Where are you at with this player and kind of his development, and where do you see him moving forward?
Yeah, I think I was pretty optimistic on Rossi before these playoffs and that kind of debacle that developed there.
Yeah.
And it is pretty confusing. I don't want to take away from the season that was, because not a lot of players could have done what Marco Rossi did in that situation last year, to get 60 points in 82 games.
Low event team too, right?
Yeah, and yeah, he was playing with good players, but like not guys who were scoring like 100 points a year or anything, right? Like Kaprizov, yes, but Kaprizov only played half the year. Um, so yeah, there's some really good stuff for Rossi. The with or without you for Rossi looks pretty good.
Nice.
He elevated players when he was playing with them. They did better with him than without him. And, to some extent, he was one of the only centers on that team. Eriksson Ek was injured for a fair bit on the season as well. And so there weren't a lot of other options aside from Rossi. And so players playing without Rossi were probably playing with a pretty bad player a lot of the time. No disrespect to the guys that they had
Hurtful.
there, but
Catching strays over here.
yeah. Anyway, I kind of want to hold both those things in my head when it comes to Marco Rossi. Is yes, the end was really sour, but the season was actually pretty sweet. And so there are two things to consider here. I don't think that the efficiency is too crazy. The shooting percentage might have been a touch high. Like he might be maybe more like a 20 goal, um, 65-point player if he
Right.
got the same deployment again next year. That wouldn't surprise me too much. But yeah, a full season of Kaprizov and even getting half of the year alongside Kaprizov, and half the year was Boldy or something like that. Like that wouldn't be a bad outcome for Marco Rossi. Does he get as much power play time in a full season with everybody healthy is definitely a real question. And who do they add this offseason is also a real question. So yeah, I tend to agree with you. I'm not comfortably drafting Rossi at this point, but I also don't want to just be like, oh yeah, the Wild hate this player because after what amounts to his second full year in the league, he was kind of shortlisted in the playoffs because they didn't feel like they could trust him very well to play defense while they're trying to take down Vegas, which is a terrific team. So yeah, I want to hold both of those things in my head when it comes to Rossi. That I think the highs can be high here with this player, and I think he will be a consistent 60+ point player with potential for even more than that moving forward in the right situations. But yeah, I think it is valid to also hold that other piece and maybe hold off on drafting and just see a little bit more how the cards fall when the season comes around. All right. Last player, number 7. Basically, we got to 7 because we were going to do 3 each. And then I said, but there's too many players. I got to add one more. And that one more for me is Logan Cooley.
Hell
25
yeah.
goals, 40 assists, 65 points in 75 games played, second only to Bedard in points by a second year player. 1752 average time on ice. He was getting more ice time in January, actually, and then he got injured. It wasn't like a long term injury, and so obviously he played 75 games, so it wasn't long term at all. But I think people are maybe forgetting that he had that injury, and people are going to say, oh, yeah, he basically played the full season, 75 games played. It wasn't exactly like that, and I want to be cognizant of that because I do think that it really did actually affect him when he came back. Injury happened, I think, end of January. Somewhere around there. And then when he came back, it did seem like it took a while for him to kind of get his legs back under him. In January, before that happened, he was averaging 20 minutes, 21 seconds in January, in 13 games in January, getting a ton of ice time there. And that's obviously pretty interesting if he's going to get that kind of ice time. And I do think that the injury affected him when he came back. Even when he did start to produce again, his ice time was significantly reduced. 1602 in February, 1847 in March, 1728 in April. So I wanted to keep that in my mind when evaluating the season that was for Logan Cooley. I do also have to keep in mind that he didn't really show a lot of progress in terms of the underlying stats from year 1 to year 2. Same shots per 60, individual scoring chances for per 60, IPP, all this pretty much the same as the rookie year. Shooting percentage does go up here, 13.3% in his rookie year, 15.9% this past year. On ice shooting percentage, a significant jump from 10.6 his rookie year to 14.3. The with or without you does look a little tough for Cooley here. Keller, Schmaltz, Genther, and Sergachev were all better away from him, which is not what you want to see in an ideal scenario. But also at the same time, you know, after the injury, or actually, I think a little bit before the injury, he did kind of get put on the Keller line, and they basically rode with that the rest of the way. And
Right.
so, what could a full season of being the center for Clayton Keller do for Logan Cooley's fantasy output? That's pretty interesting to think through. And then the other part of it is, does he get and stick on power play one? As they ended the season, he was not on power play one. And maybe that was them just trying to limit some minutes. Maybe there was lingering injury effects there. By the end of the season, it wasn't really affecting his production too much. He does score 10 points in the last 8 games in April. So he had good results. But yeah, uh, it's kind of up in the air for me right now. I think this is obviously a very talented player, a player who can score a lot of points and score points in bunches. But I think for us to get really excited about the upside case for Logan Cooley, we're going to need to see him take another step in terms of the underlying stats to start
Mhm.
to drive the play a little bit more himself and not just be a guy who can play with great players, but can also elevate great players for him to take that next step. And then, yeah, the power play is going to be a big time thing there. And yeah, what does that fit look like with Keller? obviously I think two skilled players they can make it work, but there's no if you put two of these guys, Logan Cooley and Clayton Keller, are not
Yeah.
exactly the two most physically imposing players on the ice at any given time. There's no Matthew Nyes there in Utah right now for them to put on that line and have somebody else to go bang bodies and retrieve pucks and get them out to these skill guys. And so maybe they need to find that player somehow to really make this line gel and take off to the next level. These are the kinds of things I'm thinking about with Logan Cooley going into next year. Where are you at, Blake?
Yeah, I'm really excited. I got two words for you. Jack McBain. Oh, McBain, let's get silly. I know he's a center, but who the hell cares? All right. We're just fantasizing right now. No, that wouldn't make any sense. But yeah, I'm really excited about Logan Cooley. I think this was a great showing for him. I know you mentioned that, the individual metrics didn't really change, and that's very true. But digging in on some of the micro stats, that there was a big difference in things like offensive generation, right? So shot assist, chance assist, he improved on all of those things. So he's generating more offense for his team. He's also generating more, just a touch more individual chances and shots for himself. Plus, the entries leading to chances was huge, right? He's really good at that. And then on top of that, like those are all offensive metrics that I like to look at for fantasy. But on top of that, this guy was getting a ton of minutes. Like there were games where he was getting 20 minutes out there, and I love to see that. It's different than a guy like Dorofeev, where you're like, oh man, like just get out there, like let's see the minutes. Like there were plenty of games where Logan Cooley was getting the 20-minute treatment, like sections of the season where that was happening, and that says to me that his defensive shortcomings, whatever they are, aren't enough for the coach to be like, no, I can't have you on the ice right now. I need you out there, right? The other thing I like about Logan Cooley, he's an amazing passer, right? His high danger passes, like he's really good at that as well. Like again, 99th percentile in high danger passes for, which is a really nice sign, right? That means his teammates are getting better scoring chances because of him, or, they should be, right?
Mm-hmm.
Whether it fully translates, maybe not, right? But he's feeding a lot of high danger passes to his teammates. So yeah, I'm really big on Logan Cooley. I think this is a guy we might get at value again next season. Hopefully he doesn't get steamed up, because yeah, this is a guy, if you can get him after 100 next year, geez, I mean, I think we're like probably a 60-point floor with Logan Cooley. I feel good about that. And then I think with these metrics that I'm looking at here and everything you said, I think the ceiling is higher than that. Like, I mean, is it too spicy to say like his ceiling might be point per game next season?
No, I really don't think that's too spicy to say. I'd really like to hear that the microstats are really looking good for him. We've talked about in the past, the microstats to some extent kind of describe the play before the scoring chances are created. And maybe he, to some extent, did improve some of that. Maybe some of the scoring chances he did create were actually a little bit more dangerous, than the base level scoring chance metric can accurately described, but maybe also he just hasn't quite taken that next step to translate, the good things he is doing in
Yeah.
transition with the entries and all that to actually directly translate those things into those scoring chances. And maybe that is the step that he does take next year. It's good to have those things kind of on your side when you're projecting a player to take another step in a subsequent season, I think. And, maybe he was on his way to doing that this season, and the injury really did kind of derail that for him this year. And maybe that is what we get next year. So, yeah, I completely agree. I think there's a really good chance that Logan Cooley is a guy that we get pretty late in drafts next year. Yeah, maybe past pick 100. I don't know. We'll see. Center only. Another reason to fade centers, right?
Absolutely.
Um, Pick up Logan Cooley later on in your draft, and you could be absolutely loving life with this guy. Could be, these other guys that we targeted, like Gabe Velarde late in drafts this past season, and absolutely had a banger of a year for us as a later pick. So I think that's definitely a good place to end it with Logan Cooley. If you made it this far, click the link in the description, join the Discord community. Bunch of managers in there talking fantasy all the time. all through the off season. We're going to get into some rookie draft content upcoming here. I help you get to know this crop of rookies, what it means for fantasy, what it means for dynasty, specifically for you dynasty players out there. We're going to have some of that coming out here in the lead up to the draft. We're definitely going to continue to have some of these fun topics recapping the season that was, because I really do think that we tend to only focus on certain aspects of the season or focus on certain players who we had on our fantasy teams. And so
Mhm.
we want to make sure we're kind of capturing the season that was really intentionally and thinking through, especially these second year players who very well could take a big leap in year three. Stuff like this we think is super important. So we will continue to have that out there for you as well. If you've made it this far, like, rate, review, subscribe, comment really does help us out. But that's going to be all that we've got for this episode. Hopefully, it brought you some value, helped you get a little bit better at fantasy hockey today. All the advanced stats you heard today came from Natural Stat Trick, terrific free resource. Many thanks to the band They're There for supplying music for the podcast. Be sure to check out their Spotify as well. That's it, folks. Much love.